morning. What, Prashant? I missed you yesterday.
Yes, sir. I mean, a little bit busy here with MSET, sir. I mean, counseling and all those for my sister's counseling.
Sorry?
I mean, we have a little bit confusion with our my sister's MSET counseling and all those, sir.
Oh, all right. Okay. No. I'm sure you had a good reason. Otherwise, you're not the sort who skips classes. Anyway, let's get going. Let's get going. I was yesterday discussing methodological hermeneutics, and I was talking about Wilhelm Dilthey and how Dilthey believed that when you're looking at texts of political philosophy, Dilthey was a German, and I told you that this is a German movement, basically. So he said, when you look at the text of any author, then it is imperative that you don't look at it as an end product. Okay, you should never look at the book as an end product, as in you should never think that whatever you need to know is about a book is contained in the book itself. Okay, so the methodological hermeneutics basically would say that you have to place the text in the context in which it was written. Okay, if you need to have a comprehensive understanding, a proper understanding of what is supposed to be in the text, what its meanings are, then you should also place the text and the author of the text in the context in which that text was written. So I was giving you the example of Hobbes yesterday, but today I'll give you another example. You can think of Aristotle. Okay, and today a number of people criticize Aristotle and says Aristotle defended slavery. Okay, and therefore his defense of slavery makes him a retrograde thinker, a backward looking thinker. Okay, but then you must understand that Aristotle did not look at slavery as we look at slavery. Okay, the kind of slavery that we are used to, the kind of slavery that is available for us in the context of India, which came in mainly with the Islamic rulers. This particular form of slavery is called Oriental despotism. Okay, it's called Oriental despotism, where the average life of a slave was 12 years. Okay, and people worked the slave into the ground and they did not bother to take care of him. They did not bother to take care of his needs, his well-being. None of those things were taken care of, and he would just be worked to death, literally. Literally, he would be worked to death, and it was easier to replace a slave cheaper to buy a new slave in place of the old slave. Okay. Whereas the kind of relationship that Aristotle talks about between the master and the slave is not like this. Okay. The definition of a slave for Aristotle primarily is one who is not capable of, uh, who's basically not capable of, what should I say, taking care of himself, one who cannot think of his own good, one who doesn't know what is good for him, his family, and all. And therefore, it is the master who is the intelligent one, who's blessed with a better intellect, a stronger intellect. He takes decisions regarding the life of the slave and the family of the slave. And in return for the services rendered by the master, intellectual services, if you want, call them that. The intellectual services rendered by the master, in return for that, the slave does physical work for the master. So this is a completely different kind of a relationship. It's almost like symbiotic, okay, mutual dependency. The master is doing something for you which you cannot do yourself, and therefore you return the favor to the master by doing physical work for him. Now, this does not make Aristotle a retrograde thinker in itself. But if you were to place him as the student of Plato, then he does look retrograde. Because if you read Plato's Republic, in Plato's Republic, you can see that Plato is a very, very radical thinker. And Plato basically says, doesn't use, rather, not says, he doesn't use the concept of a slave at all. Okay, and the idea of the philosopher king, which we will be discussing very soon once we start talking about the thinkers themselves, you will find that the idea of the philosopher king in Plato is not one individual. It isn't. It is an entire segment of society that comprises of both men and women. Okay, so he gave equality of status to women, which was unprecedented in the Greek period. Okay, and he did not talk about slavery at all in any of his writings, which is also very, very unprecedented. So you will say Plato was indeed a radical thinker, but in comparison with him, that is Plato, Aristotle does seem retrograde, because Aristotle believed that men were superior to women, and he did believe in the institution of slavery, even if it didn't mean that you will treat slaves like animals, which is what we are used to, which is, called Oriental despotism. Okay, please don't call it Orientalism. I will tell you later, Orientalism is a completely different concept. It has nothing to do with Oriental despotism. So what we saw in India and in West Asia, which the Americans call the Middle Eastern part of the world, uh, there the kind of slavery that existed is Oriental despotism. This is not what Aristotle has in mind. So you have to read him in the context in which he wrote. And when you do that, you judge him in one way, you are a little more charitable to him and say, okay, he's not basically treating the slaves as animals, but you will still say that he's not as He's not as forward thinking as Plato is. Okay, Plato is far, far better than Aristotle when it comes to this particular matter. Okay, but if you read Karl Popper, Karl, Karl, Popper. Karl Popper wrote this work called Open Society and Its Enemies. And when he talked about open society and its enemies, the first person he identifies as the enemy of open society is Plato. So why does he do that? He does that because Plato is very, very prescriptive in his writings about what citizens can do and should not do. Okay, so he would say that citizens should not read poetry. Okay, he believed that poetry is something which was uh, not good for the intellect of the people. He believed that you should not listen to music. Okay, in fact, the word music comes from the Greek word muse. Okay, M-U-S-E. Muses in Greek mythology are those which are supposed to be some kind of uh, non-human entities which used to lure sailors on the seas with their songs. So Plato is carrying on with that mythology and says, don't listen to music. This is what makes Karl Popper say that Plato is an enemy of open society. Why shouldn't I read poetry if I want to read poetry? Why shouldn't I listen to music if I want to listen to music? Okay, and he calls him a totalitarian thinker. Okay, so the designation attributed to Plato by Karl Popper is that he's a totalitarian thinker. But if you're Wilhelm Dilthey, you'll say, no, you're wrong. Your conclusion is completely wrong for the simple reason that in ancient Greece, there was no such thing as the private realm of activity and the public realm of activity. Okay, today we have private realm and public realm, though again, let me caution you right here that it is not very clearly defined even now as to what is private and what is not private. When we come to Mill, you'll understand that. Okay, but we do have some idea of what is private and what is not private. For example, uh, if I ask you, what did you eat for dinner? And you tell me I ate X, Y, or Z. Okay, and then if I tell you, why did you eat X, Y, or Z? Then you'll tell me, how is it your concern what I eat? Okay, how is it your concern? At least if you were a doctor and if you tell me that you ate something which is not good for your health, maybe that I can understand. But you're a political science teacher. How can you tell me, why did you eat this? You should not have eaten that. Okay, so you will say that is my private affair. You have no place in my private affairs. What I do with my private life is my wish. Okay, you're my teacher in the context of PG College, Secunderabad. So anything to do with political science and that too with political thought, if you talk about, I will listen to you because that is the public sphere or the public domain, not the sphere. because that has a different meaning again. A public domain where we meet, me in the capacity of your teacher, deservingly or undeservingly, and you as my students, right? So there you can ask me questions about, did you study something? If you didn't study something, why didn't you study? I can ask you, why aren't you attending classes? Those things are all right. But I cannot ask you, what songs do you listen to? Why do you listen to those songs? What did you eat? Why did you eat those things? So that's not, you'll say that's none of your business. So there is a private realm in which there is no place for somebody like me who interacts with you only in a very specific public domain, which is the PG College Secunderabad. It's not public domain everywhere. Okay, for example, if I see you at let us say a multiplex like Prasad's in the evening, I can't ask you, why are you seeing this film? You'll say, listen, this is not class time. Okay, this is evening. I feel like watching a movie. So I'm here to watch a movie. It's not your business. You don't have to ask me why I'm watching these movies. So this is not there in all ancient periods, all ancient civilizations. Okay, the delineation between the private and the public is something that does not exist in any ancient civilization. Nowhere is it there. So it is something that people find easy to comment. Okay, even today, not today, a few years ago, when my maternal grandmother passed away in a village, I went there after she died, and uh, I was a little grief stricken. So I had tears rolling down my face, and out of the blue, a lady walks up to me and says, "You've come today after she's died, and you're shedding tears. You could have come a few days before. She would have had the satisfaction of seeing her grandson. Okay, and you deprived her of that." I didn't know what to say. I just kept quiet, because there in villages, you don't get services. You don't get funeral services like you get here. You can hire people to do funeral services here. In the villages, you have to depend upon your neighbors to help you with all the funeral services, or if it is marriage, or if it a wedding, that is not marriage, wedding, whatever, you have to depend on your neighbors for help. That is how life in villages is. So I couldn't have told that lady who talked to me and said, it's none of your business when I choose to come. If I say that, then they won't cooperate. They'll say, if it's not our business, then you take care of it. They won't cooperate. The society that is around you, which is supposed to help you in time of need, will not cooperate. So you see, therefore, that you have to contextualize ideas. You have to contextualize ideas that are contained in a text and then interpret them. This is what Dilthey called objective mind. Okay, which is you dislocating yourself from your context and going into the context, into the history of the author and the text that he has written, and then trying to understand it. Okay, this form of understanding, I told you, he called it Verstehen. Verstehen. Verstehen is empathy. Empathy is your ability to put yourself in somebody else's place. Verstehen. And he said that's in German. In English, it is roughly empathy. Okay, so he said it is Verstehen which makes people understand the intention of an author in writing a philosophical text. Why did he write a philosophical text of a certain variety? Okay, so if you do Plato, which we will, I'll just make a quick comment. The backdrop of the Republic, you'll have to know. One is that the loss of Athens in a war with Sparta. This war was called the Peloponnesian War because it was fought in this place which is called Peloponnesus. And Sparta and Athens were locked in a bitter battle for about 18 years. But at the end of it, the Athenians lost that battle. And then their leader, Pericles, Pericles. Pericles was the leader of the Athenians. He gave a famous speech, okay? And this is actually called the Periclean Oration. Okay, the Periclean Oration, or the speech given by Pericles, in which he detailed a number of causes why Athens actually ended up losing the war to Sparta. Okay, it is this which is one of the backdrops that went into the making of the Republic by Plato. The other is the all pervading and looming presence of Socrates. Okay, Socrates and sophists. We'll talk about them when I talk about Plato, but for the moment I'm just telling you this. If you understand, until you understand the Peloponnesian War, the Periclean Oration, Sophocles, the sophists, and the problems that Socrates had with the sophists, if you understand those things, then you will understand the text, the Republic, for what it is. Otherwise, your understanding of the text remains incomplete. That is what people will tell you. And that is exactly what Karl Popper did. He didn't look into the history of Plato's times. He took the book, The Republic, read it as you and I would read a novel. When we read a novel, we don't attach too much significance to it. Okay, we read a novel and we don't read, even though novels, by the way, can be sources of great knowledge. I believe that. Even popular novels like Dan Brown's novels, like the Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, they have, despite the fact that they are not proper academic books, they don't have proper academic uh, credentials, but nevertheless, he has done some excellent research which gives you very good information about Christianity. Okay, it gives you very good information about Christianity. So don't look down on popular novels. Harold Robbins wrote trash, that is pulp. Okay, so that kind, or James Hadley Chase, he wrote pulp. What do you do with that? You're going in a train or something, you read that and throw it away. Okay, you read it to pass time. but you don't read a philosopher, you don't read his philosophy as part-time, to pass time, sorry. Okay, you have to understand the context in which it is set, which Karl Popper, despite being a brilliant man of science, a brilliant mind, makes the small cardinal error. Doesn't look at the history in which the republic is located. That is why he comes up with this idea that Plato is a totalitarian thinker. And you must understand that for all the Greeks, including Aristotle, democracy is not a form of government that they thought one should follow. Democracy meant mob rule. Demos, Demos. Demos in Greek is mob. Okay, M-O-B, mob. Mob rule is democracy. So even Aristotle, who is not like Plato, disagrees with Plato on several things, considered that as not a good form of government. It's only with John Locke in the modern period that you have a re-imbuing of democracy with a different meaning, and now it has become an aspiration for people. We all want to have democracies, but this happened in the aftermath of John Locke. Before that, nobody believed that democracy was a good form of government. This is what Wilhelm Dilthey says. This is objective mind, your ability to think like Plato. Okay, and he says this objective mind, and this phrase is extremely important, this objective mind is basically the idea of intersubjectivity. Okay, he says social sciences should have intersubjectivity, not objectivity as seen by the uh, positivists who thought that, you know, everything that has values is wrong. Science is that which deals with fact. I had talked about that to you, so I'm not going to repeat that. So he says that is not what we should be looking for. We should be looking for intersubjectivity. So what is intersubjectivity? Intersubjectivity is understanding someone the way they want to be understood. Plato wrote the Republic for a reason, because he wanted people to have a certain kind of understanding about what a good or an ideal republic should be. So you have to strike that empathy, okay, that Verstehen, which leads to objective mind, and that is the establishment of intersubjectivity. So intersubjectivity is the goal of political philosophy. I mentioned Hans Gadamer. This is called Methodological Hermeneutics, what I have talked to you today. I have mentioned Gadamer, Gadamer, Hans, Hans, Hans Gadamer. Gadamer basically disagrees with Dilthey. Okay, he says there is a very good intention behind what Dilthey is asking us to do, which is to try and understand a philosophical text in the context, in the ideas in the text, in the historical context and establish an objective mind. But he says there is a fatal flaw in this method. And he says, if Plato is rooted in his times, okay, if Plato is rooted in his times, and if Aristotle is rooted in his times, me or you as the reader of either the Politics by Aristotle or the Republic by Plato, can we uproot ourselves from this context in which we exist? Can we say, I am no longer Satish Chandra, I cease to be Satish Chandra, I am now going to go and become Plato? Can I say that? Hans Gadamer says, no, you cannot say that, because just as Plato is rooted in his history, you are rooted in your own history. Satish Chandra, the person, is shaped by his reality. Prashant is shaped by his reality. Nikhil is shaped by his reality. Nikhil can't stop being Nikhil. Prashant can't stop being Prashant. Mohit cannot stop being Mohit. Because what are you saying? Are you saying that Rakesh cannot stop being Rakesh? Okay. Are you saying that we can stop being who we are? No. So let me ask you a simple question. A simple question. I don't expect you to answer it. I'll just ask you a question. Suppose you have never had any cancer in you. Let us say you did not have a cancer in your brain, a cancerous tumor in your brain. Can you understand the pain that a person with a tumor, a cancerous tumor in his head feels? Can you understand that pain? You cannot understand that pain. Why? Because you did not undergo that kind of pain. You did not undergo that pain. Okay? If you never broke a leg, you can never understand the inconveniences that a person who broke his leg feels. Okay? So what Gadamer says is that when we talk about understanding, even Verstehen, which Dilthey talked about, is not your ability to put yourself in somebody else's place. It is your ability to approximately use your own experience of a certain thing to understand something that somebody is going through. So suppose you say, I have a very severe headache. You will say, I understand that you have a headache. Okay, why? Because you have had a headache. So when you hear me say, I have a headache, and you say, okay, I understand how it is. What you are saying in effect is that Yeah, this is how it must feel because I've had it. So there are migraine headaches, which are different from regular headaches. There are cluster headaches, which are different from regular headaches. And these, unless you have had migraine, unless you have had cluster headaches, you cannot understand what they do to you. You can't understand that migraine brings a thing called photophobia. Photophobia is inability to see light. Those who have a migraine cannot bear to look at light. You have to darken the room completely. Okay. So what Gadamer is arguing is that we approach what we don't know or what we are trying to know through what we already know. Okay, he's trying to say that you are trying to approach what we don't know through something which we already know. That is the crux of Gadamer's point. So what he's saying is that hermeneutics, interpretation, is like what he calls a fusion of horizons. Okay, a fusion of horizons, because it is like learning a new language. Can you learn, say, French if you don't know English? Ideally, you can learn any language if you know any other language. But because of the shared similarities between French and English, will you be able to understand French if you didn't know English or if you didn't know any language at all? You wouldn't be able to. You learn the unknown through the known. You learn German or French through English. Yesterday I talked about Verstehen and Verstand, and I said these are two different kinds of understanding. And that I can tell you only because I have understood the limitations of English in understanding these two concepts, which both mean understanding in German. In English, there is nothing to distinguish Verstehen from Verstand. They both mean understanding. But in French, in German, they mean two different things. And that's why people write Verstehen when they are talking about empathy, which is the closest English word that comes to Verstehen. So Gadamer's idea is that everything is a fusion of horizons. The interpreter does not uproot himself from his context. The interpreter approaches the new context from the context in which he is, and they meet somewhere in between. Okay, if this is where the author is and this is where the interpreter is, they have to come in between. So for him, this is philosophical hermeneutics. And the task of philosophical hermeneutics is never complete. Different people in different